I would like to request Professor Dr. Shalini S. Gopal Krishnan, Professor Menlo College, Silicon Valley, USA, to please start our presentation.
So thank you very much. And I'm glad we're starting ahead of time. So that's even better. This is obviously very, very critical, especially now during COVID, that we use technological tools for universities. So COVID, we know, has changed everything, right? So either we just wait, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, and like everything becomes normal, go back to doing normal, or we embrace it. We like, hey, listen, this is not a bad thing. This is something we can actually use to improve ourselves faster and better. So we know society will have to relearn things. And universities, well, the best thing they do is teach, right? So societies have to relearn. We've seen companies all become digitally transformed. And people were saying 5 years, 10 years. Universities were saying 50, 40 years digital transform, but they've actually done it much, much faster. So instead of seeing this as a problem, I think we should see this as an opportunity. And of course, technology can enable this. So if you look at an entrepreneur, and I know a lot of very senior people are here who've been entrepreneurs. What is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is agile, they're forward-looking, they embrace risk, they exploit ideas, they move fast and break things. They fail cheap, fail fast. And a university is exact opposite, right? A university is structured, tradition-bound, bilkul aisa hi hoga, as it's been happening for the last 100 years or 1,000 years. We are backward looking because we're looking at knowledge that we received from the, traditionally, and then we are not forward looking. Universities are not risk averse. Remember, I also come from a university system. We're slow. We're like, if we have to make new changes, we have to have committees look at it, people talk about it, policy will happen. And then we don't want to fail because failure is not an option for us. So we're asking universities to do something which is opposite of what they are, right? Okay, so you're asking people to do something which is not what their core strengths are. And that's hard. You ask anybody to do anything which is not comfortable, that's very, very hard for people to do. Or universities or systems, it's much, much harder for them to do. But today, of course, we are in the VUCA world. Whether it's because of COVID, before that also the world was becoming pretty crazy. There is volatility, there is uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So how does one survive in a VUCA world? The biggest thing we do is experiment. Okay, we are open-minded. We just don't take risks just for the sake of it, but we balance it. Huge amount of curiosity and solution orientation. So even when we ask our students to be open-minded when they come to class. We ask people who we educate to be curious and to find solutions. We are just not giving them theories and saying, hey, go ahead and do things. We're saying, hey, listen, there's a problem. How do we solve it? And so remember, the VUCA world is going to really change the way we do things, and we can actually do this. And of course, we know education can change countries, lives, the world. So why should we have entrepreneurial university? Why can't universities just remain as they are, happy bastion, steady, stable things? Because if we continue with the old ways, we will lose. And we know from history that if you adapt, you will survive. Okay, and we know we have to learn to adapt all the time. If we don't do that, we may as well. We've seen big universities die after thousands of years. A very interesting fact is, if you look at institutions which have survived for thousands of years, universities are in the top. We just live there. If the only way we survive is by adapting. I mean, look at Oxford 1,000 years back and now. Look at all our institutions. Companies live and die, but institutions stay. So we also have a stake in the game in adapting. So what are the community characteristics of an entrepreneurial community? Definitely leadership. And I see a lot of SMEDA leaders, and I'm so glad to see that they're actually getting involved in this. Infrastructure, okay? And Mukesh Kumar ji was just telling us how there is huge amount of connectivity, even though you may not have broadband, but you still have people are connecting when the need is there. Of course, digital connected through the phones. Education is huge amount of that. Support systems, which I'm sure Smita gives a lot. The vision, and again, I'm so excited to see, that there are senior leaders in Smita who are continuing to give that vision, to create this entrepreneurial community. So of course, my mandate has been to focus on the technological tools. And this is from the World Economic Forum. And as you can see, lifelong learning is going to be a huge thing. So whether it is, you're coming for a short 2-month course, 4-year course, 3-year course, to 2-week courses. I mean, you have really good, powerful courses which are 2 weeks. That's going to be a thing happening in the future. Basic education is, of course, needed. And this is, again, very critical, digital fluency and STEM skills, because we have the digital economy and new value creation. So we have to go digital first. This is a picture of a smart city in Korea. We have to be agile. We don't have to say, this is the way things were done, this is how they'll be done. We cannot afford to do that if we need to survive. It has to be lifelong learning. It's not like, hey, you went to college, you studied, and you come back and finish. It has to be forever. All of us who are in this audience today, we are learning new things every single day. I'm excited to hear the rest of the presentations, and I know I'm going to learn something new. I can apply it. And of course, you have to go digital. You have to go digital for this. And again, like I said, it's important because of COVID has forced us, which is a good thing. For education, distance learning is, of course, been fantastic. This has been there for years and years, but now it's almost mainstream. Out of 190 countries in the UN, I think 100 countries, almost about 110, had all their schools shut down for a period of time. So they had to go digital. So distance learning is now mainstream in the world. Remote work. People all over the world are working from everywhere. Just about anywhere in the world, look at this. This is an actual person working in the forest, right? So again, that's something universities have to show people how to work remotely. It's one thing to come and work, sit down across your boss and talk to them. But again, how do we train people to work remotely is another thing. So what kind of tech tools are we going to be actually using? I know all of you have heard of this. I'll briefly go through this, and then we'll find applications for universities, because this will make us more entrepreneurial. There's edge computing, there's big data, there's AI, there's virtual reality, and then of course digital twins. So big data, of course, we know everything from our phones to Facebook, everything. We are actually collecting data all the time, and that is a huge thing. And colleges have been using big data for quite some years now, universities, where they can actually collect information from students, make customized products. AI is now, in fact, in parts of Asia, like in China and other places, a huge amount of AI is being used in teaching, customized, at scale, at very low cost. So you can actually teach very customized, let's say math. Here is a thing for math. Mukesh Kumar ji and Dr. Hussain ji learn at different speeds, right? So their entire learning will be very different. And it's customized, and they found it's much cheaper, much cheaper and much more effective. Because then you're not scared ki dusra banda kya bolega, what happened to me. They don't think I understood things, but it is the learning curve is faster, cheaper, better. So AI has been actually, been very powerful. Digital twins, especially when you're talking about SMEs in Pakistan, this is not spending the amount of time and money to create the prototype, to create the factory, and then see whether this is market. You actually can. And this picture actually shows you they're actually building a factory virtually, right? using bits and things, and then deciding what are the problems, where the issues happen, before you actually spend money, time, labor to build it. Maybe adapt to different things. Once it's actually physically created, you can use digital twins to repair. So colleges are huge, universities are places where you can sit in your house and sit and become a good repair person to repair these very high-tech kind of machines. So engineering has embraced digital twins in a huge way. Even now, universities around the world are using digital twins to teach labs, which is a huge thing. And then of course edge computing, which Pakistan is just perfect for, especially when you have a lot of cell phones and connectivities through cell phones. Learning, think of your cell phone as such a powerful tool. Education, health, all can happen through the cell phone. We've got enough apps today that can actually provide good level education. WhatsApp education has become pretty mainstream in parts of Asia. So even if you're the smallest town and city who doesn't have access to a university, who maybe they don't have the money or time or access, you can actually use that edge computing, which is computing at the final level, to be able to create education, which is absolutely wonderful. And then of course virtual reality. Think of teaching history, geography, all kinds of, even science. There are places again in Asia, which have actually created models for learning science through virtual reality, where you think you're walking into a heart or into the human body or probably into an engineering system. And most of these are available free. So if a college can adapt, use these things and make college more engaging, but the thing is we have to break the old systems. So this is an actual picture of history in the 16th century and how people were actually moving around. Okay? Augmented reality. Again, the phones are our biggest powerful things. Almost more people have phones than probably have internet connectivity. But phone, this is in Amsterdam, and here's your phone, and you've basically they've put the phone next to a real building, and the history of the entire place is being told, or whatever else you want to do. So augmented reality is becoming another huge thing in colleges around the world. This is an application of AI. This is a customized, at scale, free resource where you actually have a companion who cares. So instead of you are going through college and universities are like, oh God, I need so many people to keep people there, to understand, to help, to go through the system. The system can actually do that. You can all actually go after this and work on this. This is just an amazing thing. This is a company. So right now I'm moving away from technology, so actual companies are doing such things. So that was an AI thing. This is Botsify, which, look at this. It automates your education system. In 14 days, it's a free trial. You, teachers, even with very little knowledge of computers or AI, can actually create a chatbot for free. So I'm teaching something, but people have questions. I may not be there 24/7. You can just create a chatbot using your specific things. And this doesn't take more than an hour or two. Of course, active, immersive, complex for VR, AR. At my class, in my college, I'm actually teaching analytics with VR. So people are getting more immersed instead of sitting behind Zoom and discussing with each other. Students are actually sitting and actually doing virtual reality through things. So this is happening right now. This is interactive anatomy. Again, they're using just their cell phones and you're learning. So this can move around, you can move at angles, you can see what's happening. And they have 2,000 structures. All this is all away. You can rotate, peel away what's behind the skin, what's behind the thing. This is how education is happening in different things. So they have modules and quizzes as they are. This is a company in Brazil. And you can see this is augmented reality. This is a real building. And what if you wanted to paint it? What would it look like? So these are just some examples. I know we don't have too much time. I just wanted to share some examples of how you can, universities are using it right now. How can we use it? Even with whatever constraints we have, we can actually do it. These are companies which are actually using big data to improve results, to reduce dropouts, to customize programs. These are huge things. And of course, then there are other things. Entertainment. Entertainment is the single most powerful thing for people to move digitally. Like, you don't have good connectivity, you don't have a thing, but I want to see the movie or song or whatever, people actually do this. And of course, IoT is huge. Drones. There are places in the world they've taken drones to drop books into hard hit areas. You can actually do that. 3D printing is becoming very, very big in colleges. If the costs have gone down, you can actually use that to teach engineering, customized engineering. And of course, 5G, digital contactless payments, blockchain, telehealth, use your phone. You can actually use this. So the university around the world are actually using these things for the last 10, 15 years, and COVID is just accelerating it. But in order to use this to combat COVID, or even increase the number of people going to university, these tools can really, really help. Thank you. I hope I'm on time. Yep.
So next I would request Dr. Nicole C. Jackson. Dr. Nicole is assistant professor in Menlo College in Silicon Valley, USA.
I'm going to be talking a little bit about digital transformation of entrepreneurial universities to achieve their third mission. And this presentation is really looking at, how do we rebalance three perspectives? So what we're seeing right now in terms of the current issue in societies is that there's rapid transformation, there's increasing public concern and debate, and perceived divisions and effects from digital transformation on economies, and what purposes universities should they have, right? And so here I'm taking this from Mintzberg's book on rebalancing societies. How much rebalancing do we have to do in terms of the public sector of respected governments, the private sector of responsible businesses, and then the plural sector of robust economies, okay? So in terms of the third mission of universities, of course, the third mission is described or is defined by, as the university is not only being responsible for qualifying the human capital, the education, but also for producing knowledge, okay, the research that must engage societal needs and market demands within its own socioeconomic context, okay? And so, especially as we see the convergence with digital transformation, and now is exacerbated by COVID, one of the major issues that we also see is how do we need to develop what we call a relativist approach around these three missions, okay, but often lack appropriate socioeconomic framing to enhance that impact. So these issues, or this issue, raises three key questions in terms of several different aspects, okay? So the first is, to what extent is the university sustainable as an overarching institution to renew the entrepreneurial capabilities? Shalini, my colleague over at Menlo College, nicely showed that in terms of this transition, right? Between kind of the older paradigm versus the shift toward more agile frameworks, okay, that are needed. Second, to what degree can the entrepreneurial university take a larger role to maintain access to resources as both a public and a private good? Okay, so in many educational systems, this can be defined very differently, but increasingly, the entrepreneurial university has to weigh in on both, okay? And then how can we better leverage the plural sector? So communities and nonprofits that can help balance out the misgivings or the gaps found in public and private sectors. And then how can that make the university be more boundaryless? Okay, so we face an increasing kind of convergence with digital transformation in terms of rapid deinstitutionalization of existing university structures toward more of a networked society. So how do we look at that? Okay, so my background and training is in organizational strategy and also organizational sociology. So one of the critical gaps that we see, and this is coming from a forthcoming work that was published in Business and Society, is how can we look at this in terms of defining better themes of impact for the entrepreneurial university? And how can we link that to sociological framing, which can motivate policy on a more broader level? So this will look different based on, obviously, the geographical and also sociocultural context, okay? The first one is opportunity gap reductions. So one of the major things that we see with digital transformation is kind of this exacerbation or this growing divide between the haves and the have-nots, right? And so one of the things that we can see with digital transformation is a potential means to reduce classism, eradication of class differences in entrepreneurial capabilities. Okay, so this might mean, you know, somebody who's first generation going to college, right? Understanding these different kinds of tools to enable their own platforms in the businesses, which were not necessarily accessible in the past to them. Okay, there's also the counterpoint of how much of an exacerbation between those who know the technology versus those who do not would increase the divide in existing economies. So this is the opportunity gap reduction. Economic relevancy. So what kind of levels of economic, socioeconomic impact do we expect? Are we looking more for individual, organizational, community-based, which industries? So oftentimes when we look at this in terms of, for example, in the US context, a lot of this is based in terms of the commercial sector, in terms of retail-based or transportation-based industries. But how does that look similar or different in other economies and other socioeconomic contexts? And then how does that need to be shaped, not just in terms of the organizational and community-based, but also individual impact for the students as well. Value assimilation. This is an area that has not been thoroughly researched and really needs, I think, a lot more attention. So what cultural values, value assimilation basically deals with what cultural values or frameworks become essential and which cannot be dismissed. This deals with the role of cultural identity, right? How does culture and identity in a society shape the way in which we transact? So for example, I think of, for example, in France, for example, a lot of the businesses are family-owned businesses that have been there for generations, and they run on a cultural logic. And how is digital transformation, how is that not only utilized to displace that, but how could that also be utilized to complement that? You know, what does that mean in terms of maintaining a cultural fabric for society? And then co-location gaps, where might power and access to resources need to be redistributed through a network perspective of colleges to communities, okay? So these are different kinds of sociological frameworks that can be utilized for that. This is how I'm drawing from like 4 sociological traditions as a starting point here. This is also, again, from work that I've developed with several co-authors. So the first one, opportunity gap. This is really getting more into like a Marxist argument. You know, should digital governance be designed to ensure collapse or integration into a common core class system? So under, let's say, a Marxist perspective, it's the idea that, you know, how do you eradicate, you know, these different levels in society? What does that look like? And if we look at this in terms of kind of a broader policy concern, if we have increased access to the means of production to collapse former or existing hierarchical systems, then some of the issues might be like privacy considerations, you know, or suppressed differences. And, you know, examples here, if we look in terms of industry, China and Facebook, for example, there's been lots of controversy with Facebook and China in terms of how much privacy there is, right, in the data collection. And then how much should there be forced eradication? This may skew government intervention at the expense of for-profit, non-pluralistic sectors, okay? Then the second area of impact, economic relevance. Should governance be designed through structures that maximize the greatest benefit for society or take into account the role of individuals? This is more of like what we call functional utilitarian view, okay? This often drives more capitalistic societies. You know, this is less framed around socioeconomic economic justice as found under the opportunity impact frame. Here, of course, the key issues are how to manage and drive AI and data information as a public good while also preserving less monopolization. So here I draw upon the US context. You know, Amazon, for example, there's huge issues in terms of over monopolization of like Amazon, right, at the expense of free market competition for other enterprises, right? So this speaks to this kind of economy differently. But these are considerations. If we're building this into an entrepreneurial university, what context are we beginning with? Okay. Value assimilation impact. How should governance enable access to reaffirm sociocultural identities, norms, and culture? And this can range from everything from, you know, religious norms to anything from sociopolitical. This follows more of a Durkheimian view. And this is the one that I think has been grossly kind of overlooked in terms of digital transformation, in terms of the impact, but it's probably one of the most important as we look forward in terms of future impact in societies. Okay, so this can be long, it may be found in long-held tribal traditions in doing business specific to that culture or economy, not easily replicated through formal class systems or structures. And the examples I gave here are family-owned businesses, regional economies, additional applications to creative arts and industries. So this key issues here is how much does digital transformation and entrepreneurial university facilitate what we call resource permeability, stability, continuity, and the preserving of value, okay? And then the final one, co-location impact, is really dealing with what we call more of a micro-interactionist tradition. How should governance or not enable individuals to understand themselves in the context of networks? Okay, so oftentimes we find this one in newer emergent economies where more formal and stable government structures may be non-existent. Examples here, I think about Nigeria and microfinance platforms. And so here are some considerations include there's a need to build context to deal with socioeconomic inequality. But at the same time, how do we scale these networks? Not just in non-plural sectors to inform newer industries, but also in forms of governance. That's an area where the entrepreneurial university can step in. Okay, so I just have some concluding points here. So avenues forward, where do we see the educational ecosystem shifting? Concept of fractals and complexity that question academic inertia. So everything is kind of moving more to what we call like almost like a quantum physics perspective, right? Things are becoming increasingly fluid in this world. What micro communities are needed to be designed around customizable education models, concept of zero distance. Everything's competing on the edge, right? There's like closer interaction between the individual to the direct consumer. The same thing is true in education markets, right? And this is what we see with Shalini's presentation, that this questioning of these older educational institutions in terms of their traditions are increasingly being kind of unraveled through these newer dynamics. Then the challenges to linear traditional monochronic degree programs. In the past, it was the idea that, you know, you would go 4-6 years on a very, very strict stipulated time frame in schools. Now, there's a possibility of having continuous ongoing education, right, at different points in time. And then how do we create broader consortia to harvest best practices, intra, not inter universities and beyond professional associations, and then also the need for empathetic organizations and what we call ed hacking education, right? So where do we need to look at other sources, ways in which we can build themes around education and their delivery, okay? So the conclusions and implications here are that the effects of digital transformation may exacerbate existing socioeconomic responses to leading to rapid deinstitutionalization of established economies and universities. Part of the greater need, though, is it's not just about moving things online, it's not just about digital tools, but it's also the appropriate sociological framework, right? What do we want to begin with? Where do we want to end with? How is that going to influence either opportunity gap reductions, economic relevancy, the role of socio-cultural traditions, right? And then that network perspective, okay? And so what policies, interim and long-term, will guide greater attention to remaining sectors for renewal, as well as the university at the nexus of formulating what we call dynamic capabilities there. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
I request Engineer M.A. Jabbar Sahab to please start presentation. Engineer Jabbar Sahab, M.A. Jabbar Sahab is a member in Board of Governors, SDPI, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Sir, if you can hear me, so please start your presentation.
So my presentation, it appears to be, would be more like under the sort of column of university, but still, since I'm talking from the perspective of developing economics, the circumstances surrounding the issues and surrounding the economic development, surrounding the practicing surrounding the cyber world access, surrounding the technological developments, actually has in fact accelerated this distance learning, distance resolution of issues, distance understanding of the what is required and what is not to be done and what is to be done. This has been actually accelerated on your side. I think I was hearing Dr. Nicole also. So I was trying to compare as what difference would us. The problem of video linking and all that, some of the tools, discreetly, not at large, but mostly in our mainly used for the large scale manufacturing and large scale companies were not really existing much in the SME communication. However, I think due to this COVID, at least 4 months of a GDP is lost in our country. So mostly, I think the main problem remained with the SMEs who were not really, I would say, not the conversant, but most of them at the lower tiers, which is higher in the percentages, really were affected. Means they were adversely impacted by the COVID-19 situation, adversely impacted by the 4 months closure almost of manufacturing and 4 months closure of service providing side of the SMEs, apart from also affecting the agriculture side SMEs of the supply chain and forward linkages based industrial and services sector. So the problem is that this COVID, at least I would say, has made us to believe that this distance learnings and this distance sort of interconnections and distance connectivity, in effect, appears to be now getting a dynamics of sought for implementation and sought for adoption. That is a good sign over here. So we think that our SME sector would also be beneficial from the learning practices and from the practices under the doctrine of necessity in our country, you see. Now, let's see what would be the SMEs in Pakistan. In fact, I'm saying it may not be a new news for you people who search the websites and people who really go to see what are the original data. We have a majority of employment. Rather, I'm say it's say in statistics wise, some are highly credible, some have low credibility, some have medium credibility. It even touches up to, let's say, 80% and beyond. So you can just imagine that the livelihood of the people, I must say, who would number more than any other category are the SMEs. Now, the SME sector in Pakistan started being under focus when the government or the public sector in Pakistan, because in the developing economics, mostly the public sector is sort of acting on behalf of the private sectors, and private sector integrates individually, and it takes partnership is 50-50. But like in United States or EU, I have even seen the standard institutes being run by the private companies. So that is the difference, that over here the public making decisions is more in dominant, and integration on even public-private partnership is very much valued. So let's say in Pakistan, you see, as compared to your side, if I give you some of the figures that in our case, what we call SMEs, I'm some more in people in number working up to the state organs like Central Bank of Pakistan, like Ministry of Commerce, like industry, like even Shamida, and like our all SME policies. It is the entrepreneur or entrepreneurship which is employing more than 200 people, you see. While I mean, say, as far as in Far East is concerned, my experience is that the 10 people would do the same job if we are employing the 200 and more people in Pakistan. So that's a question of technological applications, difference in the productivity, difference in the technical tools. We have been hearing a lot with regard to the academy. Same tools have a equal value agriculture, let us talk so. But then in the SME definition in Pakistan, you will also should not be shocked that it's a 150 100K, $150,000, what we call is a paid up capital, means if you are the person with the security exchanges and all that, the companies have to have certain paid up values. But according to the other idea of value, it is again $1.5 million, what we call SME with. So you can see weak and feeble, credible numbers of LSM side, large scale manufacturing, and we believe that from 65 to 69%, based on the statistical collected data, which are not precise credibility, but credibility to sectors. And the SMEs, then we leave the space up to 25 to 30%. And then in the meager share of exports, which in Pakistan is only 25 billion US dollars in a sixth populous nation, is not much. And but still, the share of the SMEs is not less than 21 to 24% with during different periods. Then again, as far as sales are concerned, I think then you would be also sort of, it may not be a new thing for those who are touching all the websites in Pakistan and trying to learn statistical data collection, interest, whosoever has. About 93% SMEs would have a hardly annual sale of, say, a million rupees, which is about 6 to 700, you can say, some very, less than $1,000 to see on an average. Now, let me give you some other statistics, but let me just say that our SME sector, which is 30%, it has to be sort of improved in terms of its annual sales, in terms of its production, in terms of its productivity, in terms of its access to the, if not same, but not less than the privileges and the voice which is available with the large scale manufacturing, in order to also bring them into the network of contributing to the prosperity. In Pakistan, in the last 10 years, I have been hearing, based on the statistical collection, that our SME sector could be, I must say, 4 to 5 million. Sometimes, some of the statisticians would say that it is 6 to 7 million. So this is the figure around in a country of 220 million people. And what we have been for the last 10 years, Samida is doing a very good job. In a way, it is like an interministerial coordination body, which is trying to analyze at what would be the impediments, removal of which can increase the two things. Number one is the cost of production. Number two is quality of production. Number three, market access. And then if we divide market access, then market access in the world, you are well versed. Sometimes some of the countries are having bilateral, agreements like free trade agreements. So our market access sort of tilts towards that. But then in the cost of manufacturing and in the quality of the products have always been required to reduce consumption, so that the domestic commerce takes to have a better quality, less cost. You see, at the multiple of these factors is sort of enjoying a preferred choice for the buyers. So now, in any home country like Pakistan, I think the SMEs should be a tool of development, employment, because in a country of 220 million and per capita, I would say less than 2,000 US dollars. So we need to have more people who should sort of get engaged in expanding SMEs. That is what I think the first desire of any political government in Pakistan, in order to sustain its continuation, in order to stabilize the governance system, in order to have a stability in the whole institutional framework, so that without conflicts and contradiction, the economy moves and stabilizes. In our country, say we have been able to sort of, if not all, some relaxations in regulatory frameworks have been considered, and some are more on the way. On the taxation side also, some of the relaxations have been provided to SMEs in terms of tax compliance of certain reduced levels, and in terms of their registration as a single man company, and some of the other issues still remain the same applied for as LSM, like labor regulations. We have a lot of laws, about 50 laws in our country, federal, what you call provincial, and the local levels, which apply on surveillance of all the industries. So just some of the laws considered inevitable in the say, for the safety, for the consumption, for the environment, and for the working environment cannot be asked to be flexible in case of SMEs, but they eventually remain a burden for their progress. Now, having said so, let me just see what more issues we could do. Entrepreneurs, rightly, I may say, well defined, but in Pakistan also, we are trying to sort of improve the entrepreneurship, so that responding attitude and contributing attitude in SME issues in Pakistan can be made effective, so that it can have more share in the GDP. Its productivity improves, its production improves, and more people are induced in the entrepreneurship, in order to sort of increase not only the prosperity, but in order to increase the home take income of the people, and in order to have a stabilized political system, you see. Now, as far as finances are concerned, I mean, say Samida, the regional chief, will also talk or bear with me that Samida and ourselves, we have been together trying that some of the requirements of hard prudential regulations, like collaterals and all that, have to be at a reasonably accommodating level, so that the Samida gets up, you see. Means its present value of 30% to GDP, if it increases by even 1% a year, it increases at least 3% of employment, and it generates our per capita income even more than that, 3%. So it has a multiple cascading effect on the whole economy. So the concerns about Samida are existing at the top political leadership, and they have sort of been talking a lot. But then resolution to those issues, in my personal view, is more or less on ad hoc arrangements, like putting more custom duties, additional regulatory duties on the imports, in order to provide them a better price cost manufacturing structure to sale. That's not good. In terms of political economy of world trading, you see, we have to sort of live in an environment of competition that only induce us to be productive, and to be partner in the global world, and to be a better partner in the world trading system of the rules, wherein I think the system is still, if not, you see, very accelerated working since the departure of the interest of US. I've been attending all the WTO ministerials, you see, as a delegate member. So, but still, I personally believe that rules of the business, I mean, say, if across the borders are equated, little bit preferential and differential treatment can be made, but it helps in integrating to the human chain. tools to improve the value of purchases. I've been working a lot on the standard side, quality side, and I have a big complaint that the manufacturers normally are hostile to the value of supply they receive. And the people who give money for purchases, they have to be adequately supported. Anyway, let me skip to my, again, come back to the original side of my discussion. On the human resource side, yes, we have had large deficiencies, but I think the government is spending a sizable money on creating the institutional infrastructure for providing human resources of adequate value. I'm also chairman of a company wherein we train boys for providing, say, technicians to the automobile industry. And we have been successful. And the way they are in the final year, they get the jobs. So things are improving. On the management side, since our SMEs mostly are owned by the family businesses, you see, it is like family businesses, and more or less, it is not managerial based skills and tools have been adopted in the whole system, though partly it is available. But still, I think some of the things required to be converted into also managerial system adoptions, which always help in production and productivity. And apart from that, I think one thing which I must share with you that I've been personally always talking about cost of doing business and the world ranks and all that. I've been sharing with the surveys, data and all that. In fact, in Pakistan, the cost of manufacturing is rising, and that is really creating problems for SMEs in supporting their output activities in the market as saleable activities. That is a big problem, but that is a domestic problem. And I think the present government is alive towards giving space of the hard work of the SMEs, which can produce but cannot sell. But then for the time being, the tools which are used by the government are not good. I don't support, because the competitive, generating the competitiveness is essence to solving the problem, which can integrate us with the world economy. So that is what has been always my talk. But still, the government comes with the short circuit policies. And let me finally just touch upon, okay, who's taking care of economy of SMEs in Pakistan, or who's taking care of issues being solved by. Mainly, I think Samida is the man, you see, bank, which is trying its best to sort of ministerial connections, and say, trying to have a connection with the private sector so that a public-private partnership platform is made available. So it has a forward and backward linkages. It goes to the Ministry of Industries, and that it comes with its own platform. So I think structure of this organization and the spirit of the organization is good. But again, there are certain things which are beyond their measures. So we are also making advocacy as how best these problems can be contained. So I think finally, I will just say that the progress of any economic activity is contingent upon fiscal and monetary policy adjustment. So as far as fiscal is concerned, during the COVID, since you are just talking this in terms of more of COVID, in 4 months, you can imagine if a GDP falls by, you see, 4 months equivalent in number, you see, it's really a big problem. So the government of Pakistan during these period were providing certain incentives. For example, salaries were being provided as loans at subsidized rates. That was a good move. Then deferment of the loans with SMEs were allowed for 1 year, if not all, at least most of them who had some supporting collaterals, they could gain from it. And then apart from that, some of the provincial governments, equivalent of 3 months, some tax exemptions have been given. So overall, SME is surrounded by 40, I must say, parents in this country. I must say they have been a little bit compromising on creating some space for the SME to stay alive and wait to revive. Thank you very much.
Next, I would like to request Dr. Hussain Nadeem Sahab. Dr. Hussain Nadeem is Executive Director, the Nerve Center.
Thank you, Mukesh, and assalamu alaikum to everyone. And first of all, to Smita for inviting me, and some excellent presentations before me, Nicole, Shalini, and Jabbar Saab. Some very interesting insights. I wasn't actually expecting the conversation to be on that in so depth and also on the educational front. So really insightful and interesting for me to hear some of the comments that were made over here. I actually, for the introduction part as well, I recently have shifted from the Nerve Center, which was my data analytics firm, and we were providing policy input to the government. And in the past few weeks since I got this invitation, I have now moved to Islamabad and I'm part of the federal government. I am running a national security think tank in the government. So a lot of our work is to do with the reforms, restructuring of the national security and policy apparatus as well. My conversation is going to be on the innovation in governance, the opportunities and challenges that we face right now. I have been working in this sector for the past couple of years now. I've worked both inside the government and outside of the government, which has provided me some good insights on what the problems are from both the outside and the inside. And I usually begin with this on this issue with a question, which is, if you look at the situation in Pakistan, the worsening of air quality in Lahore for that matter, the stunting growth that we see in South Punjab and in Sindh, the rise of terrorism that we saw, the sectarian violence and all, and the censorship of media, these seemingly very distinct things all have something in common between them. And it is poor governance, if we have to pinpoint at some point. But it's very easy to comment or characterize a nation state as poorly governed without really understanding what it actually means and what does it entail to be poorly governed. For that, I think it's very important for us to understand, and we've specifically when you're looking from a Western lens to understand supposedly third world countries, on what does it even mean when it put it in the context of India and Pakistan. Misgovernance, poor governance, fragile states, failed states, these different notions that come about. Here's what has happened in the past few decades, which I want to bring as a framework. You see, the idea of nation state and power has completely transformed in the past few decades. Where once I remember living in Pakistan and we were growing up in the 90s, there was only one state channel, that was PTV. And PTV was responsible for the national narrative. In 2000s, one PTV transformed into hundreds of private channels. So the state lost control from the national narrative in many ways. Moving onwards, from 2000 onwards till now in 2020, we see a radical rise in social media. So from one state channel to 100 news channels, private channels, to now over 18 million people in Pakistan over social media, setting the national narrative, the national dialogue, the public debate. The state has kind of essentially lost power on one of its important functions, which is the national narrative and the national story. Now that is not the narrative part only. When we look at the state's monopoly on violence, we also notice that the state's control on authority and violence was challenged after 9/11. And we looked at the non-state actors, the sectarian outfits and all of that. So the state has also let go power on that. Then again, there is a monopoly on the resources. We also see that the state does not own the same level of resources because the private sector has seeped in. I can continue to go on this thing where and how the state has lost its power in the 21st century. The reason why this is so important to understand is because essentially, while the governance around is the same, the state has completely changed. And with the state, the governance structures are still archaic in the same old colonial structures, which is why we see a particular problem in Pakistan and in third world countries, and even in the Western countries right now, where we see so much chaos, the inability to govern, new form of politics, new form of governance methods, the technology that are kind of like breaking the old structure. So that important point is where I would like to lay down the framework. And this is very important because this is also an opportunity. So the grim situation that I've created is not only set out as a sort of situation where there is a problem only, But within that problem, there creates an opportunity as well, because when the state is undergoing a sort of shift and it is in the crisis situation, it is only at that point when the state actually starts to think and to be able to adopt to newer situation and crisis. So within that framework, what has erupted in the past decade or something when I've been working in Pakistan is that the state has a huge appetite now in incorporating new ideas, in incorporating change. And I'll use the word innovation because the state has realized that its capacity to execute basic research in large departments where we have over 1,000 people, the state does not have the basic capacity to even pursue Google research, let alone data analytics or modern tools. So the state is now forced to bring in people from the outside, engage with the private sector. So that one thing has been there. I mean, in our departments, for instance, the state's ability to pursue research, the state's ability to produce narrative has diminished. Part of the reason is because the state has gone into a crisis mode. It's consistently in an emergency mode where the strategic vision and the strategic policy making is kind of diminished, which essentially means that state is now busy firefighting all the time, which essentially again means that the state does not have the capability or the capacity to undertake those kind of strategic research that is required out of the state. Hence comes the private sector. A company like the Nerve Center where I was working and which I helped found it, we become the strategic arm of the state, or we help the state to actually think, or we start thinking on behalf of the state and its priorities. So that is one big opportunity that I have noticed in the state and specifically in the government of Pakistan and abroad as well, where I work with other states, the US government and the Australian government, where I've interacted, that they require and rely more and more on the external actors, the private sector. So that's there. The second thing that has happened is the digitalization, which has again forced the state to go out, get out of its comfort zone, and bring in innovative ideas, innovative people to somehow help the state to get into the 21st century. Now, the digitalization process is so interesting because at one point it is anti-status quo, where it challenges the very notion of the state and very power of the state. But at the same time, digitalization is also allowing the state to modernize and retain its power. So we're still in that process and journey where we don't know where it will eventually land. But there is a consistent battle even in the United States that we see and over here in Pakistan, where the state is constantly fighting with the digital media companies and the big techs, because now the big techs rule essentially the national narratives or the global narratives, or even the privacy and the data and the human patterns. So that thing is there. But the state has realized after a couple of years in Pakistan specifically that we tried to ban YouTube in 2011-12. It didn't work out. For 2 years it was banned, but it backfired. The state realized that it has to allow space to the digital forces to take in. And what the state now is doing, it is getting out of its comfort zone to bring in the youth, bring in the tech companies, allowing and opening up itself to integrate technology. So that has opened up a very large space which was absent in Pakistan, forcing a lot of kids who are now digital and who are working in the digital age. They might not have degrees, but they have very active social media presence, or they're very good with technology and coding, to get integrated into the state or help the state, or even get contracting with the state to actually start changing things and innovating the governance space. So that has started happening in the past few years. The third thing that has happened in the opportunity where it has landed, which is unprecedented, is the crisis situation, the COVID-19. In Pakistan, there was a talk on digitalization. There was a lot of seminars. There was a lot of roundtables, sort of things that we're having right now. But the day Corona happened, everything accelerated. All those talks and seminars, they just became a reality. People were forced to integrate onto webinars. In a government departments where there was no concept of having a laptop or an email address. And now I go to the government departments and everybody's doing webinars, which is surprising, but at the same time very good, because it has forced the government to think more innovatively. And now once they're on the technology, it's very hard for them to go back. So one silver lining that happened in Corona was the fact that in countries like Pakistan, where digital penetration wasn't that much within the government has over the night become revolutionized in a way. It has become innovative. You have people using WhatsApps, you have people using new technological methods, webinars for meetings and all of that. So that has been a sort of silver lining in all of this process. So it was again a very new opportunity for the government to undertake reforms and to also undertake new mindset within the organizations. But again, it doesn't come without a challenge. Now I'll focus a little bit on challenges because the challenges and identifying and diagnosing them is one of the most important parts. Essentially, because if we need to fix them, we need to fix and have a very specific idea on what specifically the challenges are. The problem in Pakistan is very specific right now. We still have a post-colonial state. And I'm using post-colonial state as a word that is used academically. In reality, we still are continuing with the colonial state. The systems, the 1935 India Act, 1858 British India Act, those are still in place. The mindset is still there. We're still using the British gazetteers, which were I think, which were written back in the 19th century, 1880s and 90s by the British, to still undertake our assessment of Punjab and different areas of Pakistan. We haven't really upgraded to any of those, to be very honest, since we haven't had too many census. But this post-colonial state mindset and the structures that were made by the British Raj to govern a particular population are still in place by the very specific local elite that has continued since the supposed decolonization era. The problem with that structures is that any innovation, any technology is directly opposed to that. It is anti-status quo. So for the state, it has become so large. In Hamza Alvi's word, it has become an oversized state, overdeveloped state, that the state is now protecting itself from itself at times. Its interest has become larger than the interest of the people and the public. However, the technology and digitalization process has been an equalizer, where the state, again, like I mentioned in the start, has started to lose control. So the state structures are now crumbling. If I may be more honest, I believe that the state structures in Pakistan and countries like India have already collapsed. It's the after shadow that they're in. It's only a matter of time when things will start changing. And I hope it's not a very chaotic change. The state will allow the space itself to be taken over by the forces that will provide that innovation and change. So that one problem is there. The second bigger problem is not even the post-colonial mindset or the ruling elite or anything. I come from a political science background, henceforth I look a lot of things from a very post-colonial lens. But there is one single problem of inertia within the government. So the system has been carrying on. They've been used to doing something in the same way for a very long time. Who breaks the inertia? So a lot of things are being done senselessly, or we call it Kafka's basic model on how some things are being done for out of no reason because they were done before them and before them. So the inertia is a very big problem when it comes to innovation. But again, technology and digitalization process is changing that as well, where inertia is being challenged. It is being constantly forced out because of the situation. For instance, the corona-like situation had completely overhauled the entire inertia because people had no other option. And that is where we see a large transformation that is happening. One more thing that I think is very important when it comes to the challenges is the HR. Now, I worked in organizations, and one of my core areas of interest is organizational transformations and reforms. I believe at the end of the day, all reforms, all innovation, and all transformations come down to one thing, and that is people, the HR. The government of Pakistan and the public sector, and by and large the private sector as well, it has a very archaic method of HR. I mean, they're still looking for 16 years of work experience, BA, BSc, PhDs, in a world where things have transformed, where we have course structures that have completely changed, the universities that are undergoing a change. So I would be very happy to hire somebody with a 6 months course certification in data science and somebody with a 4 years degree with a 10 years of experience who doesn't know how to operate the new tools on data analytics. So those things are changing, and within the government, the mindset is there that we need to really get rid of this same HR policy. So lean hiring and bringing in new ideas where we change the basic structures of CSS examination, that is, I think, going to be very important. But right now, that is a very big challenge. last thing, which I think is very, very important, and I get a lot of criticism on that from my peers at times, is that when we talk about innovation and change, for some reason in Pakistan, and I believe that's the case with other developing states as well, the donor funding and the donor mindset starts seeping in. Partly because we believe that when we think about innovation, Silicon Valley. When we think about innovation, Sydney or London. The problem is that, with all respects to the people in Silicon Valley, the innovation over there is the tech. It is suited to a particular context in the United States or the Silicon Valley. When we try to import those foreign ideas or foreign made solutions into Pakistan, which happens, by the way, when the World Bank operates or the UNDP operates in Pakistan, they bring in the imported ideas, they try to force them down in Pakistan as it is without the context. The net result is that on the paper we are innovating. In reality, we're basically going back on innovation because those ideas are flushed out as soon as they're implemented in Pakistan, because they're not implementable. They don't adjust to the surroundings. So one big challenge that we face in Pakistan right now is we need to localize the idea of innovation. Get rid of this foreign Silicon Valley complex that we have over here. Try to start thinking about local solutions to our local problems. But for that, we really need to first understand what the local market and the local research is. Unfortunately, the problem still is that a lot of donor studies are being utilized by the government of Pakistan to understand Pakistan itself. Now, here lies the problem, because you can hire a consultant from World Bank and UNDP who will come and give you the same slides that he gave in Vietnam or in Cambodia, change the slides and provide the same solutions as the solution for Pakistan. And that has happened, by the way, in the government. When I was working with the previously at the Ministry of Planning and Development, that was the general case. So our job as the Pakistani government or the new people that are coming over here is to essentially to undertake local research and surveys to see where the problem lies, and then try to contextualize and then talk to the people in the Silicon Valley, look at what's happening around the world, contextualize it, bring it into the Pakistani context, and then start implementing, or maybe generate our own solution from as it is. But that divide between what innovation is and what innovation should be in Pakistan, there is a big divide in that. And that is one of the problems that we face over here on the regular basis. When we talk about the innovation in governance and the possible opportunities and the challenges, automatically our mind starts thinking Silicon Valley and other places. Whereas I think we need to localize the language of innovation. And sometimes innovation doesn't have to be very large or robust or groundbreaking. A very small innovation can have a very large impact. So we need to start thinking innovation in a very different way. And that is one important point where I think I wanted to bring the effort. But I'll close my part in one small thing, that in the situation that we've gone through Pakistan in the last couple of years since 9/11, we've seen everything by now. Terrorism, we've seen insecurity. There is not a single family that has not been affected by insecurities and issues. But at the same time, I think we are now placed in a very important position where there is a transformation that is coming, and it will come. The only thing is that how big we want to go in that, because the government has an appetite. The public sector, while it's crumbling, it is there to actually incorporate changes. So for anyone watching who's a new graduate, or somebody who wants to invest in Pakistan, or somebody who's wanting to work in the innovation sector in Pakistan, I think this is the best time. I mean, Charles Dickens said, this is the best of the times, this is the worst of the times. And I do believe that in Pakistan right now, and even many developing countries where I have studied during my PhD, we're all undergoing that time where technology, social media can be a great equalizer between North and the South. And I think that is the way forward for countries like Pakistan and other countries. I'll end my conversation on that. I'm really looking forward for question and answers and a discussion on that as well. Thank you so much.
Next, I would like to request our last speaker for today's session, Mr. Mukesh Kumar. Mr. Mukesh Kumar is Provincial Chief, SMEDA Sindh Region.
Thankful to Beria University, IRS, and Rouge, all the organizers of this Innovation Summit, to give this opportunity to SMEDA to hold this session on very important aspects, that's entrepreneurship and technology. as we see that learned speakers talked about the opportunities, the challenges, as rightly said, every opportunity, every challenge has multiple opportunities. And Engineer Jabbar Saab talked about the different aspects of the inside problems of the SMEs and particularly entrepreneurs. So I would be talking about the how public sector organization, particularly SMIDA, is playing its role in the entrepreneurship development in Pakistan. When we see that even the most physical interaction or consultation is required when physical in when we are visiting the doctor. But this COVID situation also forced to move to telehealth. So now this is the reality. That this is when you are taking advice related to health through telehealth facilities. So forget about other things. It may be education, it may be procurement of groceries or anything. So this is now reality. This is part of our life. We have to adopt with the changing system. But this is more important for the entrepreneurs, for the small businesses. Those businesses which have changed in the current scenario and try to digitize their system, try to utilize the social networks, social media, they were successful to remain in the business. Those businesses who could not match, who could not adopt with the changing scenario, they really faced a lot of challenges. So I would be sharing the presentation. So one thing which was discussed about the number of SMEs in Pakistan, it's a big challenge. You know, the availability of data is very difficult. Access to data is very difficult. Last SME census was done in 2005. And at that time, like we had 3.2 million SMEs, but there are other options that how you are going to get the data. Like in Pakistan, we know that about the number of electricity connections and the gas connections, commercial and industrial connections. So this was one approach. You can get the number of SMEs in Pakistan. Besides these connections, we also know that in economy like Pakistan, we have also informal economy. So roughly, as per different estimates, there are 20% SMEs who don't have their own electricity connection or gas connection. They are getting from some other source. So this makes us close to roughly 5 million SMEs in Pakistan. And of course, most of the enterprises are small enterprises. And this COVID-19 situation made their business operations very difficult for those small businesses. Even though the government of Pakistan introduced many incentives, many schemes, like medium enterprises were able to get wages for their employees for 3 months, for 6 months. They were able to get very subsidized loans and other facilities. But it was big challenge for small business because of the regularization, because of the collateral issues, because of the documentation issues. So here the roles comes of the government, how to improve access to these enterprises, because more than 90% of the enterprises in Pakistan are small businesses. So there have been some steps taken by State Bank that like we have one program earlier, we had Prime Minister Youth Business Loan Program, like now we have a Kamyab Jawan program. Under that program, young entrepreneurs are able to get financing up to 1.5 billion rupees. That is a reasonable amount from the Pakistani perspective. For the longer period, like 7 to 8 years, with grace period of 1 year, and very subsidized rate. So this is one aspect of access to finance. But if we talk about that entrepreneurship framework, and if we talk about nowadays in every university, we have incubation center. So that is very positive sign that those universities are not only teaching entrepreneurship or few courses or one course, but they are also providing space to young entrepreneurs that they can start business from the university with their ideas, and they can get mentoring service. They can have access to financing through conventional banks, or they can also look into venture capital or business angels. So this facility was not available if we just talk about 5 years back. So this is the change which we have seen in Pakistan, and this change has come in last 5 years. And besides that, because of the COVID-19 situation, we have seen a lot of opportunities in education sector, a lot of opportunities in health sector, in online sales, food supply from the homes, and that has also created new entrepreneurs, a new wave of entrepreneurs, which have learned a lot in this scenario, and they are also going to transform their business from home based to small businesses, from small business to medium businesses. How the government of Pakistan through SMIDA is facilitating these entrepreneurs or the small businesses. One is about the environment. That is very important. Like we have recently presented the SME policy to the government, and it is with the cabinet. Hopefully it will be approved soon. The one of the important aspect of that policy is the creating a culture of entrepreneurship. Even though we need to facilitate building up infrastructure, providing them access to loan, but creating entrepreneurship culture at technical and vocational institutes, at the universities, by providing them facilities in the incubation centers, by providing them grants for startups. These are the things which are part of that SME policy. And we are also going to, Jabbar Sahab was talking about different regulatory issues. What now we have tried to categorize startup businesses, small businesses, and medium businesses. So for startup, we are suggesting that for their the infancy stage of 4 to 5 years, there should be no regulation, so that at least they can grow. Once they are at a certain level, then you can bring them in the tax net or other regulatory systems. Once you give them breathing space. Once they grow to a certain level, then you can put up into that tax net or other regulatory framework. In the other aspect, we support on sectoral level, because different sectors have different challenges, and also you have to support them within the sectors. You have to work on clusters. You can for innovation, like we have put up certain common facility center, where one small enterprise, it's very difficult for that enterprise to put huge investment in technology. So we put one facility where small enterprises come and get certain facilities. And then we can also provide experts and for that sector, so that enterprises or the new entrepreneurs of that sector can get help from those services. Then we have one-to-one services to SMEs, like business plans, like feasibility studies, trainings. There is one service in which we improve the energy efficiency and productivity of the units. So far, we have been able to provide this energy efficiency and productivity improvement facility with the support of Japanese experts, German experts, Korean experts at more than 700 industrial units. So this is the service which was highly appreciated by the private sector, because this was directly benefiting in their by increasing their profits. So these are the areas which are talked about. These are the areas in which we provide support to new entrepreneurs and SMEs. And as I talked about, this is about the outreach. According to our recent estimates on basis of electricity and electricity connections in Pakistan, there are roughly 5 million SMEs in Pakistan. So these are the few things which we have done so far, around 100,000 SMEs were facilitated by our organizations, and currently due to the COVID situation, we have initiated many online services, like training programs. We converted to those trainings to webinars. We also started SME clinics, that one expert sitting at any place of brand management, and any person sitting in any part of Karachi or any part of Pakistan, they can call him or her to specific queries. In that, like we go to a doctor, medical doctor for certain problem and get the medication or maybe requirement of surgery. So in this also SME clinics, we were trying to help them in their business problems. Then we also started thematic help desk areas, that in the particular area, they can have certain programs, they can have ideas from experts. So these are the things which we started in COVID situation. Still now we are not able to hold the classroom trainings. So that's why still we are continuing these areas. And these are about a few projects which we have done with different donors like UNIDO, USAID, UNDP, KOICA, JICA, GIZ, and many international and local donors. So as we have also implemented different programs through Government of Pakistan funding that is being done from Public Sector Development Program. These are the other areas where we have helped them in exposure visits. Let's say we took a few growers from this province to Multan, that's in Punjab province. In there, we took them to mango pulping unit. That how that mango pulping unit is facilitating the mango growers. So, and how they can also establish such facility in this province. So these sort of exposure visits we arrange intercity and inter-provinces to create awareness, to tell them about different developments which are happening in the region, in the country. And as I shared about these different training programs, we also done different trainings with UNDP. And these are different projects which we did with different government organizations. This was about home-based worker, one village, one product idea, which was initiated way back, many years back. This was about the PMYBL loan scheme. Now this is being done under Kamyab Jawan program. Under this program, 20,000 entrepreneurs got loan up to 2 million rupees. And recently we have also done one project that that is about agripreneurship project. As we see that the economy of Pakistan depends also up to a certain extent on agriculture, and even our textile sector depends heavily on the agriculture. So the issue with agriculture is about the modernization, use of different agriculture implements, how to make innovation in agriculture. So in this, we are working with government of Sindh. We have created different groups of 4 to 5 persons. Like we trained, they were graduates in agriculture, engineering, social sciences, soil sciences, and relevant areas of food sciences. So we trained them in soft skills, we trained them in business skills, and then government of Sindh has given them agriculture machinery. So now they are providing agro mechanization services to the private sector in the rural economy. As recently we have also started one program that is called National Business Development Program. In that we are providing grants, we are providing free trainings to new entrepreneurs and SMEs. Then we have started SEMIDA one window program. Under this program, we are encouraging formalization of any business, and any sort of formalization, we are going to take that cost. Any entity want to establish business at partnership concern or private limited, that cost will be picked up by SEMIDA. We are also help them in registering if they want facilitation in copyright or trademarks, and we are also facilitating them in registering with different government organizations. So this we are trying to do under one window. Then we're also implementing one project in garment sector where we are providing machinery of up to 2 million rupees so to young entrepreneurs so they can start their own business. And there are other initiatives which we are planning, and most of these programs are focused on young entrepreneurs, but definitely there are challenges, particularly to access, to avail the different opportunities or different programs of government of Pakistan. It's difficult for young entrepreneurs because medium enterprises, they are well organized, they are well prepared for the documentation or compliance with the different regulation of the financial institutions or different development organizations. So, but we are trying to help them to create an environment so that young entrepreneurs can get benefit. And we see that with the COVID-19 situation, as learned speakers also told, that this is an opportunity and we have to look at the opportunity side in a focused way. So thank you very much.
We have time for some question and answer session. Professor Dr. Shalini and Dr. Nicole, there's one question that how in United States entrepreneurship help you manage COVID-19 challenges? Please share some US experience other than the academia ones.
Nicole, I'll start and then you can take over.
Okay, I'll take over afterwards.
Yeah, sure. So I think we've had so many more hackathons happening. People's youth from, because I teach in the youth, but the youth all around the country have started coming up with newer ideas. Much more businesses have been started, or startup ideas have been floated. So entrepreneurship is, I think, thriving. And in fact, I actually, along with Nicole, we've got a thing where we are allowing students to learn anywhere, not even a student. It could be a person like Dr. Mukesh Kumar said, SMEs. If you want to have an idea and you want to start a startup, we will help you through the process. So I think with unemployment going to be so high, entrepreneurship is becoming really, really big. And we all know, remember during the pandemic, Newton created calculus or discovered calculus. So during the pandemic now, there are people, sitting at home and creating a lot of new things. So we are very excited, and it is increasing far more than we hoped for. Nicole, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's also kind of an interesting dynamic where we see a lot of kind of newer kind of solo entrepreneurs, independent entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurial activity. At the same point in time, there's also been a lot of kind of increased resistance towards Zoom because so much has been going online. There's some predictions already that after COVID, we might see a little bit of a pushback toward online mechanisms for at least a year because of the amount of saturation that people have in online learning environments. Everything being done online, like from 8 o'clock in the morning until like 7 o'clock at night. That'll be interesting to see what happens post-COVID, how long that happens. But I think that the interesting dynamic, though, is that the digital transformation has definitely taken hold and has definitely exacerbated the need to be more agile, the need to be more innovative, and to really consider these technologies. So that's what we're seeing as well. So it's kind of both the entrepreneurship, but also the need for human kind of more deepened human interrelationships. I think people do really value still, and even more, the need for some kind of relational aspect. Empathetic AI, for example. I just went to a conference in Silicon Valley where they're looking at empathetic AI, like how do you create AI has more empathy, deep human relation skills, not just the cognitive aspect. So.
Okay, great. That means you saw a lot of innovation during this pandemic. Okay, so we have another question from in M.A. Jabbar Saab. Sir, can you hear me? M.A. Jabbar Saab?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, thank you so much. Sir, this question is regarding what do you think are government policies enough to support entrepreneurship and particularly SME sector in Pakistan?
Well, I think given the resource constraint and given the continuation of, I must say, questions on the economic management governance, some of the things Hussein Nadeem talked, but I would go beyond. I'm not really in person, but even shareholder of thinking that in Pakistan, we have a lot of problems of a good economic management, which can effectively and prudently and you can say assure a reduced time period based output or result orientation. But I think now, as Mukesh was telling you, that the top leadership of this country presently appears to be little more alive. I would use the word more alive to the cognizance of the fact that SME is the backbone of the economy. So they are working on a policy. I was member of steering committee, so we worked upon a draft policy for the last few years. And now the new policy is being debated at the top hierarchy of political leadership. So let us hope if certain things are there which are of critical value to accelerate and help in promoting SMEs, then I will be as much happy as you will be.
Sir, thank you so much. Definitely, we have resource constraints, and you rightly pointed out that SMEs are the backbone of any nation. And definitely, with people like you in the steering committee, I hope you will defend the SME case very well. So the next question is from Dr. Hussain Nadeem, Executive Director, the Nurse Center. So this question is regarding your experience considering in private sector, and the participant would like to hear your views. What you think about the government policies? Are they enough to support entrepreneurship, particularly SME sector in Pakistan? What is the viewpoint of private sector?
Uh, so thanks for that question. Slightly broad question, so I'll try to narrow it and limit it down. The so I've had experience both in the private sector and the government sector, and based on different areas that we talk about, uh, I don't personally think that the government has to really intervene within the private sector. The private sector creates its space on its own at times. The government has to be a regulator. If the government starts playing the private sector, then you're not allowing the private sector to organically grow. You're essentially becoming private. You're privatizing the government itself, which does not always work in the same way. So the government needs to provide ease of business instead of forcing the private sector, or instead of like uh, creating a sort of very in-depth public-private partnership. So I'm against any ideas of uh, too much government influence in the private sector. I would rather go with the American model, and how the American founding companies and the big giants, they saw the space that was there, they innovated, they put in the research. I mean, I look at some of the best models of the US universities, for instance. As much as the NSF, National Science Foundation, funds them, the equal amount is funded by the large corporations, because there is a very important link between the private sector, academia, and the research. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, that link is not there. And in a lot of other developing countries, this very essential link is missing. Hence, the people have a certain particular mindset, and I think that is that mindset is kind of coming from a very post-colonial legacy, where the people takes the state as a protector, or somehow the source of income and the source of you know how the language in Pakistan and India is Mother India, or Mother Pakistan, and all of that. It stems from that specific mentality where the state is somehow a protector. I think it's the other way around. In the US, you will never hear fatherly America, or motherly in the US. It's the private sector that runs the show, and any interference of the big government in the private sector is pushed back. So I think that mindset needs to be transformed and shaped in both India and Pakistan. Pakistan specifically, I won't talk too much about India, but in Pakistan, I think that mindset has to be there, that when the government is failing to deliver something, there is an opportunity for the private sector. And I think we've seen that, for instance, when the public sector institutions like the education and then the health sector started regressing, we see Beacon House, the city schools, they started taking that space. So it's good in a way because the market forces are in play. It's bad in a way because the government is not regulating those markets. So the consumers are getting a very big beating out of it, because the private sector then can develop a sort of monopoly, or a sort of a mafia, which we have seen, where the prices start going of education sector going sky high. So the government needs to play the regulatory part in that. The rest, I think, is done by the private sector itself, based on the market needs and the link with the academia. I think that is very important part.
Okay,
I
so
hope that made sense.
yes. So we need to create the right link between the private sector, academy, and research. And as referring to your presentation, the right man for the right job is needed. So next question, and finally the last question is from Mr. Mukesh Kumar, Provincial Chief, SMETA Sindh. And it's although this is some repeated question, as Mukesh have already highlighted some latest initiative, but I'm repeating the questions. It's saying that please highlight some of the latest initiatives of SMETA and details how to avail those services.
Okay. First of all, what we have done that because of the COVID, it was difficult for the individuals and to visit any office or like that. So we started online services, whether it was training, whether it was getting advice, or whether to get any information. So we were able to convert almost all of our services to online services. That was the one thing which we did. Then, as I earlier told, that we have also initiated few grants program. Those grants program are going to help you in improving organization development, uh, that may help you in improving HR of your organization, and that grant is also going to help you in formalizing the business. That you want to convert your informal business to become sole proprietor at a formal level, or partnership or private limited. And also we encourage that if you want to protect your uh, trademark copyrights, so that is also one aspect where we are facilitating new entrepreneurs to get benefits from these services. One aspect is also corporate branding, because for small business, its branding is not only important for big businesses. This is also important for small businesses. They need to realize that, in fact, we have been conducting many programs, and now what we are doing, we are helping them at smaller level. That okay, you need to have some sort of brand, you and try to come up with a approach, and for that we are also giving them some funds. So these are the things. Besides that, we have many common facilities, like we are helping private sector in putting up cold storage in those areas where we don't have cold storage facilities. We are helping in putting up a ripening unit, because in those areas, the ripening is being done through conventional approaches. So these are the programs which we are implementing currently. And we are hopeful that we have also put up other proposals to the government, which would be approved and to be implemented in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.